Welcome to Gotta Run. This is Will Sanchez. My honored guest tonight is Lee Saxby. I ran into Lee in an interesting way. I was looking online for my favorite walking shoes, Viva Barefoot, and they had a link to YouTube. To my surprise, it was about barefoot running. It turns out that Lee Saxby is the foremost authority on barefoot running. Naturally, when I heard that Lee was going to be in this weekend for the New York City Barefoot Run, I reached out and asked him to join us here tonight. So please welcome Lee Saxby to the show.
Hi, Will. Thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to see you in person. Lee, I'd like to get started by sharing with our audience a little bit about yourself. Where were you born, a little bit about your schooling, a little bit about your family.
Okay, well, I was actually born in Vancouver, Canada. My parents emigrated there for 6 years. Came back to the UK, did the normal stuff, but joined the Air Force at 17. That's where I really got into sport and exercise, actually. Then I left the Air Force, went to university to study sports science and majored in biomechanics and became a personal trainer, stroke coach. And yeah, that was my basic. That was great.
Which university was that?
It was actually a polytechnic, it's called a university now, but it was Liverpool Polytechnic.
Mm-hmm. Is that a 4-year program?
It was 3 years, actually. Yeah.
3 years? So it's accelerated in England, I guess.
Yeah, I think most degrees. It was a BSc, but yeah.
Interesting. You said biomechanics. You know, I would think that's an engineering degree, but you said it was a sports related. How are the two related?
Well, actually, biomechanics is probably the hardest, if you like to call it, or purest science that you can apply to sport. All technique is based on biomechanics. So it's based on, physical laws, Newtonian mechanics. It's actually the foundation of it all, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, you mentioned you became a personal trainer.
Essentially, I was a personal trainer, but I started developing more as a coach. They're very different.
What kind of sports did they teach you in the Air Force?
We did everything, actually, because the college that I trained at was where they trained the PTIs. So we did
PTIs is?
Physical training instructors, yeah. So it was actually where they trained all the RAF PTIs, the Air Force PTIs, and so we were taught everything. In fact, it was great. Every day we did about 2 hours of sport, so it's very
excellent.
Good. And I actually found out I enjoyed that more than the engineering, so.
Excellent. Now, after you graduated from college, I guess you did a personal training. Was there a difference between what you learned in school and the real world?
Actually, yeah, this is how I actually got into barefoot running. After leaving university, I became a trainer and tried to apply what I'd learned to real human beings.
Right.
I found that it wasn't really working. Yeah, the typical scenario would be I'd have a client for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they'd get broken. The knee, back, or some sort of injury. So I began to really rethink what physical training is all about, and that's when I got into evolutionary medicine. And barefoot running is really just a part of that approach. Have you heard of that?
Evolutionary medicine? No.
Yeah, they call it Darwinian medicine.
Okay.
And essentially, my take on this is if imagine some aliens came down to Earth and they wanted to keep some pet human beings, they would probably keep us as hunter-gatherers. They'd quickly work out that if you want to be a healthy human being on a sort of spiritual, social, physical level, being a hunter-gatherer matches all those needs. So there's certain, there's a lifestyle that I believe that promotes human health, and it's probably closely relates to a hunter-gatherer type lifestyle.
Okay, well, hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Well, what does that mean?
A hunter-gatherer is, there's a few left on the planet. They're sort of natural indigenous people that live by natural laws. For example, you've still got some Kalahari Bushmen,
the Porn
Amazonian Indians. They're still hunter-gatherers, but essentially their lifestyle is based on natural rhythms, lots of movement, lots of sleep.
Okay, so that's what you noticed that was different between them and the rest of the people that were getting injured.
Yeah, I just began to realise that, especially with runners, I used to train a lot of people for marathons, and the injury rates were ridiculous. So I began to look at, is there a better way? And what you'll notice is that barefoot populations, they land on their forefoot. And so, that's an interesting, at university, I was taught that running is a heel-toe gait, just like walking.
Ah, interesting.
But natural populations don't do that. So this sort of set me off on this journey. And then I discovered the pose method. You heard of the pose method?
Yes, we heard of this, yes.
Right, so Dr. Romanoff, Nicholas, who I believe is like a misunderstood genius, actually. Brilliant man. And he taught me all about the biomechanics of good forefoot running. And so that sort of put the piece together. On a philosophical level, I knew that barefoot running was the way forward.
Okay.
And Nicholas taught me the sort of biomechanics that applies to forefoot running.
By forefoot, let's define that. Is that landing on the midfoot, or in the pose method, I thought you landed more on close to your toes?
Yeah, this is a popular misconception. And
yes. Well, help us, educate us.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. I think that there's a lot of confusion about the pose method, and there's not really many people that understand it. I mean, Nicholas obviously understands it backwards. I like to think that I understand it fairly well. But there's a lot of people, especially pose coaches actually, that don't really understand the method, and that's why there's quite a lot of injuries associated with the pose method if it's not taught correctly. Yeah?
Interesting.
So, sprinters are high up on their forefoot, but that's not pose running.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're doing any sort of distance, if the heel doesn't touch the ground, you're asking for trouble.
I would imagine.
And the Achilles, the calf, it's,
Interesting. Now, you probably heard of chi running.
Yeah.
And I've been to a couple of clinics on chi running. I haven't seen the pose. I mean, haven't gone to pose clinic.
Right.
But in chi running, they say the only thing that's common between the pose and chi is the lean. Is there a lean method or lean component in barefoot running?
I don't coach it that way. I believe coaching the lean is one of the worst coaching cues out there.
Oh, interesting.
When you say that to a human being, invariably they bend at the hip, and once you bend at the hip, you're creating inappropriate levers, and then your technique starts to be destroyed. So even though there's a lean occurring, I don't use it as a conscious coaching cue. I find it a very bad cue, personally.
Okay.
So that's why my mantra is posture, rhythm, relaxation.
Okay.
I never teach the lean.
The lean, not directly, but there is probably naturally.
It's a function of speed, yeah? If
Yeah.
you're going faster, you'll be leaning faster.
Okay.
Yeah? But if you consciously lean,
Right.
80% of the time, everyone bends in the hip and it destroys their form.
Right.
Okay?
So I guess it's similar to what you mentioned about the pose, coaching it and not doing it properly. Perhaps similarly with the chi running, if you're not doing the lean properly because you're supposed to lean from your ankle.
I think there's a big difference between observed and scientific facts and coaching cues. When you're coaching a human being, you're not coaching scientific facts.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to think of cues. I think the art and science of being a coach is to discover the cues that create the movement pattern that you want. And I personally find that teaching the lean is not a good one.
Okay. Well, you've seen children run,
Yeah.
and they naturally, because they don't have any leg muscles, they use gravity to push them forward. And also soccer players, they use their upper bodies to follow the
gravitational torque, which is what you're talking
ball.
about.
Yes.
I agree, but that should be occurring at the ankle joint, not the hip.
Right.
Right? And what people don't understand is that there's two mechanisms that you use to keep your balance. There's what we call an ankle strategy, and that tends to be when you're very relaxed. And then there's a hip strategy, which occurs when you're a bit more anxious. So it's like a fear-based. For example, if I put you on a tightrope, you'd be going swaying back and forth through the hips, right?
Yes.
Because you're scared you're going to fall over. The lean that you're talking about, the gravitational torque, should occur through the ankle joint, not the hip. And when I say to you lean, consciously you'll do it through the hip.
Interesting.
That's my experience.
You could argue that it's being taught right, because I remember the way they taught the lean. You stand and then you fall, and then that's how you start.
But that again, if that drill correlates to running, that'd be great. But invariably it doesn't. People don't really understand movement, and this is why I think biomechanics is an important thing for coaches to understand.
Okay.
Because the drills need to relate to the actual skill you're trying to perfect. Okay, so running is a macro skill, and it's made up of micro skills.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you get one of those micro skills wrong, it wrecks the macro skill.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but so the art of, like I said, and the science of being a good coach is to pick the drills that create the movement pattern that you want, and a lot of them are not common to what other people are teaching, in my method anyway.
Okay. In your YouTube, I noticed that one of your drills involves squatting.
Yeah.
Let's describe that, and why is that a good drill?
Okay. To me, the squat is a good way of me assessing your function as a human being. And what I explain to people is that people that can't afford shoes, they normally can't afford chairs. So if you go to Africa or India, you'll see a lot of people, they spend a lot of time in that deep squat. And you know they've got flexible ankles, they've got flexible hips, and they're the guys and the girls that tend to do barefoot running. So to me, those two evolutionary sort of movement patterns go together.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the squat is a great way of assessing your function and creating the hardware and software sort of changes I need to turn you into a barefoot runner.
Oh, so the squat, in your case, in your situation, is a diagnostic tool.
It's diagnostic and it's a training tool. It's just
both.
human function.
Okay.
You know, human beings are naturally designed to be able to do that very deep squat, and it should be very comfortable.
I must admit, I've been to several clinics, and we haven't done the squat.
Mm-hmm.
And you also did something else, I guess, you call it dynamic squatting. Tell us about that.
Just jumps. So basically, my coaching model is based on what you'll observe in babies, okay? So babies go through motor skill milestones. You know, they learn to creep, crawl, sit, stand, walk, then run, okay? There's certain milestones. And that's how human beings create movements. They master a simpler movement, and then they put two simple movements together and create a more complex one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed fairly obvious to me that if I'm going to re-educate runners, I've got to take them back to these precursor movements, right? The ones that make up the eventual running skill,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So jumping is a great way of training elasticity, flexibility, and rhythm. So you learn to recruit muscles at the right rhythm, which is essential to any technique.
If I record a video, these are light jumps, not, jumping. You go to American gym and people are jumping, 6 feet, because I don't know why. But your jump is very, very soft.
It's very specific to the sport. If you came to me and you were a sprinter, I'd get you jumping off huge boxes. Yeah?
Oh, okay. I guess that's what I would have saw.
You've got to be able to handle high forces, and you've got to handle that in a very short contact time. So whatever I train you, if you came to me, it's not just running that I teach, for example. There's many movements that I can teach, but I analyse it in terms of the biomechanics. What are the loading forces? What are the loading rates? And things like contact time and loading rates are really, really important, and they're very specific to the sport. So what you've seen in the video is if someone's a barefoot runner and they're not going particularly fast and they're doing sort of marathon type distances, the jumps that I use will be appropriate to the distance. Yeah? If they're going to be sprinters and they're going to need more strength in a shorter period of time, then I'll change the exercise.
Interesting. I've seen the video obviously a few times, and in fact I even showed it to my personal trainer. I says, hey, and she was very, very observant, because I guess she's been trained, and to her regret or dismay, the video sometimes cut off. We couldn't see the legs, the feet. Describe it. What's the purpose of that drill of jumping from a box or a stool?
The higher the box, the higher the loading force. Okay, so that means you need more skill. You need more dynamic stability. So it's just layers of skill. So squatting is the simplest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very stable and there's less force. As soon as I get you jumping, okay, there's more force, there's less contact time, there's more instability. So I'm just gradually increasing your skill level. But the loading point of the foot is always the same. It's always the ball of the foot.
Okay, so when you jump off that little table, you want to land comfortably and with the balls of your feet.
Without losing your... Did you notice they were using a weighted bar? Because it's about dynamic postural stability. I don't want you losing your balance.
Still standing, and I think they were either holding it this way.
Yeah, it's different. I use that weighted bar a lot of different ways.
A lot of different ways.
Just to challenge your postural stability. Yeah.
So again, tell us again, what's the purpose of the weighted bar?
Like I say, it's just really challenging your posture, because my mantra is posture, rhythm, relaxation. So the hierarchy in the system for me is posture always. Yeah?
Okay.
There's no point in me, training your rhythm and trying to make you relax if you've got terrible posture. I need to reset the posture first. For me, that is the hierarchy.
Okay, it makes sense. And I can imagine that could take quite a bit of time because you essentially rewiring your nervous system. Because if you used to be if you're a hill striker, it's very difficult to.
See, I disagree. Well, actually,
really? Great.
Yeah,
Why?
I can change someone's software very quickly. Probably in an hour, I can change their software because it's, it's all brain stuff, right? I can teach you the movement pattern, but letting the body adapt is a different story. Okay, so the hardware that I call it needs to adapt, and it probably takes a minimum of 6 weeks for the sort of physiological adaptation to occur. Okay, so I can change your biomechanics and your motor skill almost instantly, but then the physiology needs time to adapt.
Interesting. Let's talk about Viva Barefoot. They make, like I said, I love their walking shoes, but they also make the Neo, I think it's called, their running shoe. So,
in fact, they've got 3 different types of running shoe now. They've got the trail shoe, which has got a much more substantial sort of grip on it. They do the mixed terrain shoe, which is the Evo or the Neo, and then they do the road running or treadmill shoe, which is the Aqua Light or the Lucy Light. So obviously I work very closely with Vivo Barefoot and Asher, who's the shoe designer, and we wanted to create as close as we can the perfect sort of minimal shoe for trails, mixed terrain, and the road. And that's what they've established.
So which of those shoes would be good for 10Ks, half marathons?
It depends on the terrain.
Okay.
So what people don't understand is a trade-off between proprioception, which is if you read my ebook, that's the title of it. Because to me, the benefit of barefoot is you get maximum feedback from your feet, which means you've got the best chance of creating a skillful movement. So if you think of any sport that's skillful, martial arts, gymnastics, what do they wear on their feet?
They wear, I guess, ballet shoes or nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Right, so because it's considered skillful, you need barefoot feedback, right?
Okay.
So to me, running is a skill, therefore being close to barefoot as possible is the best option. But human beings have evolved with footwear, right? So virtually every traditional culture uses moccasins or they use sandals, okay? Because the human foot is very vulnerable. It's got no hooves, it's got no pads, so it needs some sort of protection, right? So to me, there's always a trade-off between protection and proprioception. And I think the race is on with the different shoe companies to try and, get the perfect shoe for each environment, each terrain. So it's like, it's trying to create the perfect tool for the job. So I don't believe that barefoot is best in all situations. Sometimes you need some sort of footwear.
Your ebook, I should mention to our audience that another link it's a free book and you can download.
I'm very proud of the fact
that
it's free. That's how Vivo Barefoot sort of enticed me in, because obviously education's a huge part of minimal running or barefoot running, and I want to make sure that education was free.
I see.
And they helped me produce the book, and I'm very proud of it. And it's down to those guys that we created it, and it's for free. I'm very pleased about that.
Well, we'll let our audience where to find it. Just go to Vivo Barefoot. They probably still have those links, which is very interesting. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I don't think any other shoe company, they're part of Terra Plana, or is Terra Plana the name of the store? Because that's where I go. There's a store called Terra Plana down Elizabeth Street.
But it will soon be Vivo Barefoot.
Oh, okay.
It's
they're
like
going to change the name.
Because Terra Plana, it's an interesting story actually. The history of Vivo Barefoot is Terra Plana. Terra Plana is all about sustainable fashion, right? Which is great. And Vivo Barefoot was sort of one of the sub-philosophies within it. But the trend is obviously moved towards minimal and barefoot. So Vivo Barefoot has expanded, and now that's going to become the main focus.
I did notice that there seems to be a difference every time I look at the website.
So
Vivo Barefoot now is the...
We used to have a Terra Plana store in Covent Garden in London, and now it's called just Vivo Barefoot. And it's a concept store, so they've actually got a copy of my biomechanics lab in the back, and the customers can go in there, try on the shoe, they can get analysed, go on the plantar pressure plate. It's a great setup, yeah? So we're educating the consumer, which is what it's all about. Yes,
education is very, very key. This weekend, I understand you're going to be helping injured runners tomorrow. So how do you go about helping an injured runner?
Well, the first thing I do, and this is exactly how I got involved with this revolution in the first place, is that I met Chris McDougall, who you know obviously, the author of Born to Run. Yeah, it must have been like a couple of months before the book was actually published.
He was an injured runner at that time?
Yeah, he was plantar fasciitis. He was on this quest to solve plantar fasciitis. And obviously I didn't know who he was because the book wasn't out. And he started telling me this amazing story about the Tara Amara, Barefoot Ted, and I thought,
right,
interesting. But anyway, I just filmed him running, and I just showed him the footage, and I said, there you go. And he was amazed because in his head, he thought he was running perfectly, and he obviously wasn't. So we just took him through a few drills, just basically tweaked his technique, and we cured his plantar fasciitis. And then from that story, my name sort of got bounced around a little bit, and then I met Dan Lieberman, tweaked his running style a little bit. And
he's the Harvard professor that studies barefoot running.
Yeah, and he's the major academic.
Yes.
He's the brains behind the revolution.
Okay.
Right? And Chris is the storyteller.
Yes.
And, and essentially that's how the coaching program came around, because these guys have said, look, we've got to clone you, we've got to get you out there educating. So.
And you started this certification program.
Exactly.
You were here in New York a couple of months ago, and you trained the first 10 people or so.
That's right. I think we've got 40 now.
40. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And describe a little bit what's involved in the training. What's the profile of a runner that you look for to become a certified coach?
It's not really their ability as a runner. It's their ability to coach. And this is what people don't understand. The best athletes don't make the best coaches. They're different skill sets, okay? An athlete normally is very in tune with themselves, and a coach has to have the ability to be in tune with someone else. Right? They're opposite skill sets almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they have to be able to display good technique themselves, and that's what the first day is about. The first day is all about them, and I tweak their technique. And then the next 2 days is all about the science, Dan's research. I reference Nicholas's work, the pose method.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of forgotten work by Dudley Morton, who coined the phrase Morton's foot, because Morton's foot is a real issue if you're going to take up barefoot running.
Okay.
So I found there's lots of great research that backs up barefoot biomechanics. So they do 2 days of that, and then the last 2 days is practicing coaching, learning how to use the cues correctly. So it's very intense. They've got to pass a written exam, and then they have to send me 3 video case studies so they can actually practice what they preach. Yeah? 'Cause it's great having all this theory, but if they can't apply it to a human being, you're not a very good coach. So, and then I'll certify them. If they pass the written exam, they give me 3 case studies where they've transformed a runner, and then
from whatever to a barefoot runner.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's an intensive program.
Yeah. You met Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
She went through the process. So,
yes. Well, I met Elizabeth before she went through the process. Right. And she's obviously a fascinating person in all regards. And I can see her making an excellent coach. Yeah. So I hope we run into her tomorrow. But what else is going on tomorrow? We're taping Friday. Tomorrow is Saturday. It's the workshop. I think you're going to have a panel discussion.
That's right. There's a group of barefoot coaches, talking about how to transition safely to barefoot running.
That's interesting. You talk to other people and they'll say, this barefoot thing is a fad. Mm-hmm. But I think in New York, it seems to be hitting its peak because, frankly, only a few weeks ago, I discovered that there is a barefoot community in New York, the Barefoot Running of New York, something like that. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones sponsoring the clinics tomorrow. So it's very, very, very fascinating to me. In fact, I'm going to be there. I signed up for the program.
I look forward to seeing you then.
And I want to learn more about the course. You started the certification program. What are the future challenges that you see for yourself? What's going to happen in 2012 and beyond?
Wow. I actually believe that this is going to be a major, I don't know if I should say paradigm shift, but I think athletic footwear is going to do a U-turn. I think every locomotive sport will be based on barefoot technique because it makes sense. I mean, if you believe that sport is complex motor skill, you need maximum proprioceptive feedback. So I think you'll find that tennis and soccer and all sports will start getting into it, I think. And I'd love to be involved with that. It'd be great,
That'd be interesting. So this is bigger than just for runners.
I really believe so. Just for the elderly, for example, to prevent falls. I think it's a huge thing to get the elderly connected to their feet, so that it's and kids as well. I think kids and elderly, just in terms of lifestyle shoes. Yeah, it's very important that.
Yes, yes.
So I think it's going to be huge. I think.
Yes, well, we're all going to be elderly, so
Yeah.
so what we're saying is learn this, not necessarily to do a personal best at a 10K or whatever. This
Not
is
even
a
running.
lifestyle.
It's just for walking around. Yeah.
This is a lifestyle change for better health overall. So your philosophy is a little different. That's not necessarily to do a PR. This is to live a better life.
Yeah, like I say, for me, it's all about improving people's movement. Yeah, most people are in some sort of chronic pain, back pain, knee pain, and I believe it's because they're moving unskillfully. So,
well, Lee, we're just about out of time. This has been totally fascinating. Thank you so much for making the trip over from England. Wish you all the success in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is good. I love the concept of working with the elderly and helping them.
Oh yeah, it's just barefoot running is the trend that sort of the horse that bolted, but really it's.
Maybe there needs another name to it rather than barefoot running. I don't know, the natural movement or something like that.
We've been discussing that. But like I say, the trend, because of Chris's book, is it's barefoot running is the horse that bolted. So
yeah. That could be the kickoff to something bigger. Like
I think it will. I think people will start getting into it.